I talk to lots of people who feel they are ready, really ready for the next big step in their life. So I think, well, why is it a leap? Well, because it doesn't feel like there's anything under you when you leap, you know? It doesn't feel certain. I remember from when I was a kid in the old movies about the circus, where there was always these trapeze artists who at some point in the movie would say, take down the net. I'm gonna fly on the trapeze without the net. And so there was nothing under them, no guarantee of their safeties. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes not so much. But how can we make such a leap? And let me tell you what inspired me around this talk. Some years back, I had been to Norway and Sweden and Finland a few times. And my parents' ancestors had all come from Scandinavia. Both sets of grandparents had come from there when they were very, very young. And my dad especially, from the time that I was little, he would always say, someday, I want to go to Finland and I want to see the village where your grandfather was born. And my mother would chime in and say, well, then we should go to Sweden and Norway and see where my parents came from. And every once in a while, this would come up as I was growing up. So here I am, I'm an adult, and I'd been to Scandinavia, and I'd said to my folks, I want to take you both to Scandinavia. And I said, I can make the trip really easy for you. You know, you won't have to walk a tremendous amount. We'll get a driver, we'll get a guide, and you'll finally get to see where your parents were born. And we'll see if we can find some relatives to connect with. And my parents' response was, we're too old now. You go and take some pictures. And it was heartbreaking to me. It was absolutely heartbreaking, because in my mind, they were not too old at all. And it was like, no, I can make this happen. I can make it really easy for you. I've been twice, and I want you to see it. So I thought what really needed to happen there in their thinking, from where I sat, was that they needed to be able to make a leap forward. Now, in A Course in Miracles, one of my favorite things is, it says, every day the teacher of God, who is all of us, by the way, has to get up and say, God, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to who? So really, that's another way of saying we lead a surrendered life. So just to ask the question takes faith. To ask those questions takes a level of belief and a level of trust, because, you know, for a lot of people, it feels so out of control. But Science of Mind teaches us that there is a power in our creative thought, power to change our lives and to change the world we live in. We've all heard the expression, as a man or a woman thinketh, so in their heart is he or she. So contained within our thought is the ability to shape our destiny. We have that ability to shape our own destiny. So I really believe on a personal level, our destiny is in our own hands. It's impossible to think one thing and produce something else. We all understand that. So that must mean that my destiny actually has something to do with me, with the way I'm thinking, the way I'm living. And I can make it really plain for us here on a rerun of a Will and Grace episode. Karen's mother-in-law, says to Will, how can you expect anything to change if you don't change? See, it's even on Will and Grace. Karen's mother-in-law is in Science of Mind. So not being in charge of our mental and spiritual household produces a life that's less than our divine potential. When we don't take charge of ourselves spiritually and mentally, we're actually shortchanging ourselves. So the being in charge, I think, is an expression of our free will, our ability to think constructively and creatively. This is when we pray in the science of mind, when we affirm, when we do spiritual mind treatment, we're setting a law in motion. And so choosing to cultivate a rich inner life is which I hope everybody who attends here will do. And we do this through meditating, of course, through a practice of the presence, because you work the law and you court the presence. That's what we teach. I've seen again and again and again, people have what I call a fixed general conviction in life. It's the way they know how to be, and it's the way that they hold life. And all life takes place then within this framework or container that they have. Now that actually may be very, very different than what they're praying for and what they're affirming in their mind currently. The fixed general conviction, though, that general state of how they view life and how we view ourselves and the world and other people makes us who we are. So I think our mental conduct is contributing to the conditions that we experience, obviously. I mean, have you noticed how hard it is to change your mind concerning the things that really matter? I mean, it's difficult. I would be fibbing if I said it wasn't. It's these things that really matter that we seem to have difficulty getting a hold on, changing them and keeping them changed. Those are the things that seem to be really, really molding our destiny. So it isn't a question of whether or not we will create life. That's not the question. The question is, what life will we create? So what's the life we want to leap into? So the life my father and my mother dreamed of leaping into was a visit to Scandinavia to explore their ancestry. Now we're created in the image and likeness of God. That's fundamental to what we teach. So I believe that we have free will. We have choice. And right there, to know that we have free choice and free will is, and we have that every moment, that's extraordinarily powerful. Because that means that we are co-creators. Actually, we don't have a choice about being a co-creator. But other than that, we have choice. But most of us keep creating what we already know. That's so interesting to me, that we just keep creating what's familiar. So we wish and we hope, we consider that there might be other possibilities, but without a concerted effort in us, of both mind and heart, of both love and law, of both principle and presence, life will not wind up looking very different. I said to somebody recently, you know, if you would show me your calendar, your appointment book, and show me how you spend your money, like show me your Quicken page, I can really show you what you value most in life. And that's an old idea. Where I'm putting my time and my money is what I really, really value. So I would ask you today to think about, where do you put your commodity? Yeah, your time and your money. Where do you spend time with your family? Where do you spend time with your important relationships? Where do you spend time working on your health and your body, your creativity and your inner spiritual life? Spirit, I think, is inviting all of us into the possibility of what God, divine intelligence, spirit, would express by means of us. In other words, Spirit is inviting us into a greater possibility of what God would have us do. In the Old Testament, it's a God of law, punitive, capricious. But in the New Testament, Jesus comes along to tell us that God is also a God of love. So in the Bible, the book of Genesis, it says that God said, "Let there be light." And so into the void, what would you finish that statement with? What would you finish that sentence with? Let there be. Just think about that in your own life. What would I say? Let there be health in my body. Let there be abundance in my checking account. Let there be loving people in my life. Let there be. Because we do that all the time. So this week, I would invite you to challenge your old thinking. Because without challenging it, that old thinking continues to be in charge. So in the Bible, the stories of Adam and Eve and all the stories in the Bible reflect something for us. We're all of the characters. So when Adam and Eve were in the garden in paradise, they were told not to eat from the fruit, the tree of knowledge, of good and evil. Now that's just a way of thinking, that there's good and evil. It's a belief in two powers. And the problem with that is we don't want to buy into that. We don't want to go down there. But Adam and Eve, they can't help themselves, so they do. And they get cast out of the garden. And what do they feel instantly? They feel shame because they don't know who they are. They ate, and now they believe that they're separate. Well, that really is the base of any problem that we may have in any area of our life. It's feeling separate from divine intelligence, divine love, infinite spirit, God in that particular area. It's feeling separate. There was a group of scientists who decided that they did not need God anymore because they said, now we can clone out of the dust. We can make new life. And so they essentially put God on notice, saying, we don't need you anymore. And God responded, oh, really? Yes, out of the dust we can create, and we would like to demonstrate this for you. God says, okay, please do. And so people gathered, and the deal was, if the scientists proved that they could create what God created, then God would no longer be required. And so God said, out of the dust I create. And then he does. And the scientist says, well, we too can create out of the dust. And God said, no. Get your own dust. Which points to what we teach in the science of mind. There's no place where God, Spirit, divine intelligence is not. So I would ask us to think about today, what is your heart's desire? Because if it comes from God, if it comes from Spirit, it is not something that is supposed to keep us trapped and playing small. Because God wants us to be fulfilled, just like Spirit wants us to be successful and loved and abundant. If we're guided only by the intellect, we're going to lead a pretty small life. I think we'll experience lack. We'll experience limitation, frustration, dissatisfaction with ourselves because we weren't created just for that. And in calling forth the greatness of God within you, that's not age-bound. Spirit is ageless. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, I'm too old for this, no, you're not. If you're still here on earth with us, you're not too old for this, because Spirit that you are is eternal, is immortal, is ongoing. There's no new spirits. Excuse me. Our spirits have existed for eons and eons. So I think it begins with our mind to consider possible futures. I think if God has no place for, if we think that God has no place for me, that's wrong. God has a place for you. That's why you're here. So, do you want to find your true place in life? Because without finding our true place in life, I think we're never going to be really, really happy. The thing is, Spirit, God, divine intelligence, wisdom does not repeat itself. No two people are exactly alike. So your true place doesn't look exactly like somebody else's true place. If you thought that that was so, I think that's an error. So if we're unhappy, I wonder if we're not allowing the will of God to have free play in our lives. You know, people want to blame God. People like to blame other people for their trouble. But Spirit, God, operates according to law because God is principle. So there can be no room for the idea of blame. Really, blame is a very uncreative place. If you break the law, you suffer the consequences. That's just the way it is. It is no blame, no punishment. There's just cause and effect. Cause and effect. And yes, it hurts when we work against it, but it can also help you. It can heal you when you work with it. See, I think the human soul is like an opening through which the energy of God, the universe, is seeking a creative outlet into the world, into life. If the outlet is clear, all is well. But if the outlet, if we're blocked, then the divine energy is frustrated, and then there's going to be stressors. And those stresses look like sickness and poverty and fear and anger and error and lack. So maybe then the real art of living is to make the channel clear and to keep it that way. People work so hard to bring health and happiness and success and prosperity into their lives. But I think the idea of bringing it in is actually in error. I think what happens is that we have to release them from within us, out. Because what we teach in the science of mind is that everything we seek is already contained within. So it's not like I'm going to reach out, outside for prosperity and pull it into me. What I have to know is that the source of all prosperity is within me, and I have to open a way out for that to happen. And part of how I do that is I let go of all the stuff that seems to block it. My old stinking thinking, my limited believing, the negative conversations, perhaps the bad practices. The poet Robert Browning said, what we have to do is set free the imprisoned splendor. Isn't that a gorgeous idea? That there is within each and every one of us an imprisoned splendor. So if we're not limited by our own fear or our history or our current conditions, what life do I want to create? If all those limitations are gone, what would my life be like? What would my health be like? What would my relationships be like? If all those limitations were gone, how would I feel in my own skin? See, I think a key to moving forward, to keep moving forward, is to recognize I will not die with my music in me. Now, I know we've all heard that before, but I love that statement. The idea that I'm not going to die with all my music within me. So the musician within us will cause us to step into a greater experience of ourselves. See, God made each of us for a far greater than we know, far greater than we've expressed ourselves to be thus far. We're all expressions of the divine. Abraham Maslow said, a musician must make music. An artist must paint. A poet must write if he is to be at peace with himself. What man can do, what man can be, he must do. If we are to be at peace with ourselves, we must do what we can do, what we came here to do, what we feel called to do. And really, what's the worst thing that could happen? If I play the music that's within me, if I say yes to that possible future, it's not as bad as dying with the music still within me. I'm certain of that. And what I'm talking about is, what is that something within us that we want to experience or express that maybe we've been saying no to? See, there's no failure there. It's just a learning experience. It's how we frame it. So in Zechariah in the Old Testament, it says, this is the word of the law, not by might, not by power, but by Spirit will all things be done. By Spirit will all things be done. And Jesus said, for with God all things are possible. Now our human mind argues all the time about what it knows is possible and what isn't possible. We can all agree with that. So Robert Fulghum told this story many, many years ago, that in Eastern Europe, in a city square, there was a statue of a man, not a politician, not a leader, but a statue of a man in a tuxedo playing a cello. And there were bouquets surrounding it, bouquets with 22 flowers in each bouquet. And I know it may sound like kind of a nutty idea to celebrate a cellist as a national hero, but there was a man who lived in Sarajevo, and he became so disturbed by the warring and the fighting and the political upheaval, the economic and religious persecution, that he thought, what can I'm just a cellist, what could I possibly do? And his name was, bear with me here, my language skills, his name was Reverend Smaldevik. So in July of 1992, he decided to do something. He was a member of the Sarajevo Opera Orchestra. He's put on his attire, or his tuxedo, his work attire, and he went down to the bakery where the day before there had been a huge bombing and 22 people had been killed. And he took a chair and his cello, and he sat there for 22 days and he played. And so over those 22 days, more people began to catch the spirit of that. Now he was in the middle of where mortar had been flying. You know, the bombings were happening, bullets 3 times passed within inches of him, but he sat right there and he played. And others took up their instruments and they went to other corners of the city and they began to play as well. And he played from a piece of music that had been saved from the Dresden fire bombings. Now, is he crazy? Maybe. Is his gesture futile? I don't know. In the conventional sense, what can one cellist do? Would it be madness to go alone into the streets and address the world with a wooden box and a string bow? I mean, what can one person do? All that he knows how to do. So people from Sarajevo, the Croatians, the Serbs, the Muslims, the Christians, they all know his name. And they all place flowers at this shrine in honor of Reverend. Flowers and bunches of 22, in hopes that the best of humanity shall overcome the world. And Sarajevo is not the only place that he's known. A woman in Seattle gathered musicians, and for 22 days they played. The New York Times picked this up, and musicians all over the country started playing. So I would ask us to think about today, what can you do? Because all that you can do is the answer. And if you think you don't know, then your job today is to ask God, Spirit, divine intelligence, infinite wisdom, whatever it is to you, what can I do? And then very sincerely listen. Because I know where we have sincere questions, the universe has sincere answers. And my hope for all of us is that we don't die with our music in us. I know everyone is here, like Ernest Holmes says, with a gift to give. It's time to start giving it and living the life we came here to live. And so it is.
So it is.
So let's just turn our attention inward for just a moment and recognize that we are surrounded and filled with God's infinite, loving Spirit. And as we join in consciousness, knowing our connection with God, I further know for each and every one of us that we are all connected on the unseen side of life. And I claim for each and every one of us today that we are taking a leap forward in our life, that we are making tremendous progress in giving our gift to the world and doing what we came here to do and experiencing what we came here to experience, being all that we came here to be. I know it is the absolute will of God that each and every one of us is experiencing great fulfillment in our lives. And so with open hearts and minds, we say yes to that. So individually, I don't know what you're here to do, to express, to experience. I know that something within every person here does know. And we turn to that presence now. And we stand as open, willing vessels for the Spirit of God, infinite, within us to reveal what's up for us, where we're headed. So we include in our prayer today our parents, our children, our family members and friends, all of those that we hold near and dear. And we know right where they are, the presence of God is. We let our prayer today be a blessing in the world. So all of those situations that pull at our attention, we say that God is right there, as healing, as all needs met, as in perfect order, as in integrity, as in right action. We bless our church. We bless all churches. Synagogues, temples, mosques, ashrams, all pass to God. And I'm certain that we are blessed by being together today, that there is a raising up, there is healing available, healing for all of us, and we say yes to it. And so with an open, gracious, full heart, I give thanks that this is so. I release this word, and together we all say, and so it is.